Hey, good afternoon. Let's talk about our points, lines, and planes. Points, lines, and planes are going to be the basis of our geometry. These are sort of the building blocks of what we're going to use to make all of our geometric figures. So we're going to start with the simplest of all figures, a point. It's got no dimension. A dot represents that point, and we name it with a capital letter. I can name it A, or I can name it, W, or whatever I want to name it. As long as it's a capital letter, that's what counts. And a line has one dimension. Now this one's a little bit confusing. We always think of lines going in both directions forever, but it only has one dimension, and we'll see in a second why it's one dimension and not two. So a line has one dimension. It's represented by that line there with two dots, and it extends infinitely in both directions. Again, we give those dots each its own capital letter, and then we would name our line based on what those dots are named, or what those points are named. So notice I have A and B, so my line, I would say AB, and to let my reader know that it's a line, I'll put a line above it. And then I drew a picture of a line to the right. Remember that we need 2 points for a line. Just like we talked about in Algebra 1A, we needed 2 points to determine slope. We need 2 points to determine a line in geometry. Same idea. Zoom out again. And let's look at our line segments and our rays. Our line segments, it's just part of a line. It's only a little piece of it. It's those 2 endpoints, just like a line, and all the points between them. So it's not going to extend forever. It's going to have 2 stopping points, in this case W and X. So I have 2 points, and to name it I would say WX or XW, really doesn't matter. So I could name this XW, and then to tell my readers that it's a line segment and not a line, remember earlier we drew a line above our line, we're going to draw a line segment above our line segment. And a ray is like a line that extends from a single endpoint in one direction. So it has a starting point, and it goes forever in one direction. Here, V is our starting point, and it goes toward F. So I'd say V, F is my ray, because it starts at V, ends at F, and if it's a ray, to tell my readers it's a ray, I'll draw a ray above it. So lines, line segments, rays, I have to draw that picture above my name. And there are tons of examples of these. There are points all around you. There's the tip of a pencil. There's the camera on your computer, on your phone. There's a magnet on the fridge. Tons of points everywhere. There are lines, of course. We said light going in 2 directions because remember it goes on forever. That would work. Line segments down there. Here's my line segments. Like the lines between bricks, or your pencil, or the window frame that you're looking at. All of those would be good examples of a line segment. And a ray, we said it goes on forever only in one direction. A laser pointer or a flashlight is a really good example of that. So I drew my guy down there. He's got his laser pointer going on forever from my hand all the way out in one direction until it hits something. So those are some good examples of points, lines, planes, rays. And let's look at some points, lines, and rays in here. So examples. A, B, C, and D, those are my points. Now lines, I could pick whatever 2 points I want here, because notice, this is going off in one direction, that's going off in the exact opposite direction. So I could say AD would be a good example of a line. Again, draw that line above it. BC would also work. And I could switch the order. I could say DA or CB. So DA and CB would also work. What else could I say? I could say CA. CA would be a line. And I think a lot of us get paralyzed by the idea here that it has to have the arrow next to it. Well, it really doesn't. As long as you call it a line here, CA would be a line. You could also have rays. You could say BA is a really good example of a ray. Again, I'll name it BA. B is my starting point. Goes toward A. I'm always going to have it in this format, no matter what direction the arrow is pointing in my picture. BA is a good example. CA would be a good example of a ray. So CA works. AD could be a ray. All really good examples of rays. And then, of course, we could name segments as well. I could say BC is a segment, or BD is a segment, or BA is a segment, or AC is a segment. And then if I was going to say that, then I would have to use the segment symbol above it, just to denote that it's really a segment and not a line or array. And you can see here, this is why we have to draw those pictures above, because I could have CA as a line, or CA as a ray, or CA as a segment. So I really have to make sure to draw that picture above my name, if it's a line, ray, or segment. Now let's try to name some points here. I'd like you to pause the video, get 2 points, 2 lines, and we'll try to get some rays together. So try to get the points and lines, at least 2 of each. Again, all of these things are points, so pause the video, try it out, unpause the video, and at this point you should be done. So all of these are points except for Q. Q is not a point. So I could say A and E, or I could say B and F, or I could say D and B. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to go with A, B. It's the easiest one. Lines, I have several lines here. I could say line AC, I could say line ED or DE, I could say line BF. BF is a line, that would work. I could also switch the order. I could say FB, DE, CA. All of those are lines. You could also have line AB if you really wanted to. That would work. And rays, there are a lot of rays here. BD would be a good example of a ray. BC is a good example of a ray. Anything coming out of that middle point is a really good example. You could also have ray AC. That would work. Or ray, ray DE. DE could be a ray. So you see there are a lot of different examples that you can take out of these pictures for points, lines, planes, rays. And the last thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about naming planes. So planes are the last thing we haven't talked about yet. And a plane has 2 dimensions. We talk about like 2D movies versus 3D movies, or cartoons are 2-dimensional, or you're looking at a 2-dimensional image on a screen. A plane has 2 dimensions. So think about like when we graph. you got two dimensions. You got your x dimension and your y dimension. And a plane has two dimensions. It's represented by a shape that looks like a floor or a sheet of paper or, a whiteboard. Here's our plane. Here's our plane to the right there. Two dimensions. Goes on forever in both directions. Up, down, and left, right goes on forever. And it's defined by three non-collinear points. And it's named by 3 points on the plane. So non-collinear points, what does that mean? It means 3 points that are not on the same line. As you see over here, 3 points not on the same line. So if I can draw a line that touches all 3 points, then that would not work. So I can't do that here, so I'm doing all right. They cannot form a straight line. 3 points that do not form a straight line. So an example here, 3 points that do not form a straight line, A, E, and D would work, or A, B, and D, or A, B, and E, or C, D, and A. As long as they don't form a straight line, I'm good to go. Let's look at a slightly different example. Here's my plane in yellow. I highlighted it. And I want to name this plane with 3 points that are not on a straight line, or 3 non-collinear is our fancy word. Points. Non-collinear just means not on the same line. So 3 points not on a straight line. And I've got 3 of them highlighted there. I could say B, C, D, or I could name this plane D, C, B, or I could name it D, B, C. I could name it any combination of those 3 letters because those points are not on a straight line. They're on the plane, but they're not forming a straight line. Why don't you guys try B? See if you can name this plane with 3 points that are not on the same line. I've got all my points highlighted there in red. What are 3 points that are not on the same line? So pause the video, try that, and then unpause it. So we should be done now, and I should be naming this plane. I could name it PRT or PTU. I can name it QRS. I could name it TUW. The only name that I could not give this plane, the only one that does not work, is PRS. That does not work because PRS would be a straight line. Anything else works. Just make sure they're capital letters. So that's not a capital letter. That's not a capital letter. That's not a point. So those are my points in red. And that's how I name a plane. So that's our introduction to points, lines, planes, and rays. I will see you tomorrow where we try a little bit more in depth to identify our points, lines, planes, and rays.